we're gonna go to the library today and we're gonna pick out a book. And I guarantee it's not a book that you ever thought you'd read, but you could make an argument that it's the most important book in US history. I'm not saying it is, I'm just saying you could make the argument. Okay, the name of the book is The Commentaries on the Laws of England, page turner, I know. It was written by a guy named William Blackstone in the 1760s, and it's in 4 volumes. It looks like these are the 4 volumes, it's not. They gave me 2 copies of the same book. The top 2 and the bottom 2 books are the same thing. Each physical book has 2 volumes. There, that's the whole book. Sorry, spent way too long on that. Anyway, William Blackstone was a British politician and a legal scholar, and Commentaries is exactly what it sounds like. It's his notes and summaries about law in England, specifically something called common law. Common law is, as it sounds, the most common type of law. We also call it case law, and it's basically the rulings by judges on cases that set legal precedents going forward. As you imagine, there are a lot of these. Common law was and is a huge part of English law, and the one that applies to most people. Now, as I said, Commentaries was published in the 1760s in 4 volumes. Before then, if you wanted to know how to make a legal decision, you had to not only sort through a ton of legal cases, but there's a good chance you wouldn't be able to read it because legal jargon is famously not user-friendly. But when Blackstone writes Commentaries, he covers everything about common law. He manages to do it quickly, if 4 volumes is quick, and he does it so people can actually read it. This is the first time a collection of common law has been published and readable since like the Dark Ages, and people eat it up. Less than a decade after it's published, however, it becomes downright useful for a group of rebels across the ocean who are forming their own country and need an existing legal structure. Now, of course, Commentaries is not a perfect book, and it wasn't even the main influence on the Constitution, but it was one of them. And by the time the US is founded and the laws started actually, taking effect, legal precedents were a good thing to look back at and say, oh, this is how someone else dealt with this, so you don't have to go reinvent the wheel. You know what I'm saying? All right, so America's been founded. We've started westward expanding. The frontier all of a sudden needed lawyers. And lawyers couldn't carry giant libraries full of common law, so they just carried commentaries, which is easily done. Now, the resume of Commentaries on the Laws of England is already pretty impressive, but here's where it ramps up a little bit. All right, one of these lawyers was a young guy named John Todd Stewart, right? He's like 21. He starts practicing law in the 1820s in the newfound state of Illinois. In the mid-1830s, he lent his copy of Commentaries to an old war buddy from the Black Hawk War. His friend had found himself running the post office of a small town, but he was getting interested in politics and was looking for a starting point to practice law, so John lends him the book. John's friend does end up becoming a lawyer. He moves to a bigger city. He rose up the ranks of Illinois politics and then US politics, and years later he became important enough to amend the very document that was partially influenced by Commentaries, the US Constitution. The change to the Constitution was the 13th Amendment, and if you haven't guessed yet, that friend who borrowed Commentaries was Abraham Lincoln. It's pretty commonly accepted that if John Todd Stewart had never lent Lincoln the copy of Commentaries, Lincoln never would have gotten into law and politics. Moral of the story, I don't know, read more books, I guess?